We actually moved into our RV on the Friday night. On Saturday, as you can see, I was in New York photographing Super Bowl Boulevard. I was actually a client, so I was taking some photographs through the boulevard. And Sunday we started our journey, and on Sunday we got as far as Delaware. So we decided to go to Atlantic City, so we could at least say we've been there. We stayed there for about 22 minutes. You've got to understand, for us being in the RV, it was a very, very new feeling, and with all the camera equipment we had, parking the RV on the side of the road in Atlantic City, I did not want to let it out of my sight. We parked, we walked up to the beach as far as I could still see the RV. We grabbed lunch from the takeaway place on the same street. Actually, Nicole grabbed lunch. I stood there and paced and guarded the RV militantly. And we headed into Delaware, and our plan was on that Sunday that we knew we needed to get propane so we'd have heating, and we needed to get food, and we wanted to find somewhere nice and warm to watch the Super Bowl. We got as far as Delaware, and at halftime we had accomplished none of those things. It turns out you cannot buy propane for an RV in the state of Delaware on a Sunday. There's the first lesson, by the way, for anyone who's thinking about doing what we're doing. Stock up on propane. It actually led to the first rule of Luke and Nicole's RV Odyssey, which is propane gets filled up in the morning. You don't want to get to the evening and not be able to not only be warm, but cook or shower or anything that requires propane. The first 3 days was pretty much through Maryland and Delaware, and it was a learning experience. We didn't stop to teach in Maryland or DC because we do have a full-time school in DC. We run workshops there regularly. So for us, really, the first destination of photographing America was the state of Virginia. Colonial Williamsburg, I'd never been. I'd heard about it so many times. Like, people talk about Colonial Williamsburg. Movies in Australia talk about people going on vacation to Colonial Williamsburg. I just always wanted to see what Colonial Williamsburg was. I think Nicole had been when she was younger. I know she'd been to Mount Vernon, but for me, Colonial Williamsburg was something I just wanted to see. I wanted to really see what it was like. You know, we have a very different national history to you. You know, you've got Colonial Williamsburg. We were, you know, breaking rocks on the side of the road. I come from a convict nation. So for me, it was really about just learning a bit about the history, and I really wanted to try and capture that with some of the photographs I took there. For me, it was really about getting the light. It was really about getting the darkness, the fact that the two light sources are coming from the fire and the metal thing that he's holding, and a little bit of reflection. I used a little bit of underflash just to sort of bring a bit of light up, but for the most part, this is a shot about light. I really wanted the fire to look like fire and not look like a ball of overexposure. And the fact that it was nice and dark in that blacksmithy shop made that a bit easy. Again, trying to sort of, you know, capture that history, I stood on the side of that pathway, that road, for ages, waiting for the horse and carriage because I wanted that house and that tree and that sky and everything coming through. What really annoys me is that it just completely slipped my mind, and I'm not willing to Photoshop it. Unless I really have to, I try not to Photoshop. I like to post-process my images. Weddings and fashion shoots, absolutely I'll retouch because, let's face it, brides want to look their best, but a landscape shouldn't be retouched. And this is, for me, what I learned from this is pay a little bit more attention to what's going on where you're not looking. And to be fair, I was originally planning on photographing with the horses there and photographing up in this angle. You can't see it. There's actually one of those costumey dressed people behind where the carriage is. I just missed the shot, so this is the one that turned out a bit better apart from that, but that's what it is. Same thing with light. This one was a little bit different. They weren't as beautifully lit as that. They were a little bit in darkness. The entire thing was a little bit in darkness. There was a bit of sunlight coming through, which I used a reflector just to make sure that it was bouncing a little bit more on them. I really wanted them to be the highlight without too much help. But Colonial Williamsburg, I think that's all the photos I put in from there. Was a really great day out, and this definitely a really good start to photographing America. Our first classes were in Richmond, Richmond in Virginia, at the Capitol. I think it's the only Capitol I've come across so far that doesn't have a giant big dome on top. I think it was also the White House when there was when it was the Confederacy, I believe. But it started a really important trend on the Photographing America tour, a trend that almost had us change the name of the tour to Fountains and Capitals. Fountains and Capitals became, if I couldn't find anything else to photograph, I guarantee you I could find a fountain and a capitol. They were just everywhere. And we did a lot of state capitals, or we're doing a lot of state capitals. And it just always seemed to be that fountains and capitals became the easiest thing for me to photograph as we traveled around. So that was Virginia. Virginia for us was a learning curve, not just for the RV. We definitely learned a lot about traveling in an RV. For example, we learned that as soon as this tour is over, Nicole is never stepping foot in an RV again. We learned a lot about how to conduct these workshops. The workshops that we're running here are inherently different from the workshops we run in our regular cities. Firstly, in our regular cities, we cap off classes at 10 to 15, whereas I'm capping off classes on the tour at up to 50. So, you know, I can do it. I'm okay. And the feedback we've been having from the really big classes has been great. Another thing we learnt in North Carolina, or at the start of the tour, was that I need to be really careful what I say. I also need to be really careful when I drive. Our first, I wouldn't call it accident, but our first little slip up really happened in North Carolina. For those of you that have seen me speak before, and I've made jokes, and I'm actually going to explain this in a bit more detail now, but I make a few little jokes about how I control the weather. It is true, I do control the weather, but saying it doesn't actually jinx it. But what I've come to realize, and North Carolina really taught me this, is that my control over weather isn't conscious. I can't sit here going, I want a beautiful day. My weather control is subconscious. I get the day I need to get the photos I want or run the classes I'm running. Let me give you an indication. In 27 weeks of this tour, it has rained for a total of 5 minutes on classes. That includes Seattle. We have had a total of 5 minutes of rain, now 19 hours of classes every weekend, and we've had a total of 5 minutes raining in the last 27 weeks. If that doesn't convince you, really should. The day we got married, it was storming on the beach. It was thunder, it was lightning. I was getting a phone call every 30 minutes from Nicole's father saying, move the wedding inside. We're Australian, we're having a beach wedding. We were on the beach, we got married on the sand. And I said, it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. And every 5 minutes, I would get a call from someone. Every 30 minutes from Nicole's father, get married inside, move the wedding inside. Just, no, Nicole wants to get married on the beach, we're getting married on the beach. And sure enough, the wedding was at 4. At 3:45, the rain stopped. The decorators put out the chairs, everything came out. We got married at 4 o'clock. During the service, the minister was saying a prayer and he said, may the sun always shine on your marriage. The clouds opened and this beam of light, I swear, just came down and fell upon us. We had our formal photos on the beach and strolling through the sand, and we went inside for hors d'oeuvres, and at that point the rain started again. I control the weather. But like I said, my control of the weather is now really about not just the classes I'm teaching, but about the photos I need to get. And we learned that in Cape Hatteras, which was North Carolina. We arrived into Cape Hatteras in the middle of a blizzard. This beautiful beach seaside community was under 3 feet of snow. And interestingly, our RV slid off the side of the road on an ice patch, and we ended up plowed into 3 feet of snow. What we didn't realize is that snow was on top of sand, and so nothing we did was actually getting us out. We tried driving forward, we tried driving back. It's an RV, and there I was trying to push the thing. It really wasn't going anywhere. But fortunately, we got towed out after an hour and a half. But the photos we got, for me, and it's really about this next one actually, it was my favorite that I took. You know, you've got the sand, you've got the surf, and you've got this snow just on top. And for me, I've realized that, you know, quite often it's about the photography, not just I feel like having a nice day. But it was absolutely beautiful seeing that. and it was amazing to photograph it. I mean, how many people really seriously think about going to the beach during a snowstorm? Probably just me. And you know, I've got the photos, but you know what? This February, if they predict another blizzard down in North Carolina, I really recommend Cape Hatteras. It's a beautiful spot. I'd love to see it one summer. That's the Cape Hatteras Lighthouse. I'd really love to see it in the summer. I think it would be a beautiful seaside community, but for me, everyone's got photos of Cape Hatteras at summer. For me, it was really about, let's get something a little bit different. And for those of you that have seen me speak before, you know how important being different really can be to me. So our classes in North Carolina were in Charlotte, and Charlotte was an interesting city. And I say that with a little bit of sarcasm. I liked Charlotte. I just don't know if it's a city that I would actually go back and visit, or more importantly, open or remember forever. One of the objects of this tour is we're trying to figure out what cities we want to open and remember forever in the future. We've identified a few cities that in the next year and a half, hopefully will see us expand there, but Charlotte, as nice as you were, probably won't be one. But what I loved about Charlotte was just how much fun night photography was. And if you're a fan of night photography, Charlotte was it. That is the NASCAR Museum, where you can do all sorts of fun things. And in the background, you can see this building. This building changes colors constantly. It's a lot of fun for night photography. But what I really wanted was the NASCAR, and these lights were kind of frustrating. I really wanted all three, but they work on different settings. They're working on different timings. So I really needed to go an extra long exposure. And you can see I got that by having both the red light and the green light appearing in the photo. Both lights actually stayed. But I didn't want cars, because I'm sitting at the starting line of NASCAR. I didn't want to have the traffic coming through yet. So it was a combination of a long exposure, but not wanting those traffic light patterns coming through. I needed to have that long exposure and go out and walk into the middle of the road and stop traffic. Just kidding. No, I just picked my timing. But it's a great city for night photography. Charlotte has this, I can't think of the name of the park, but it's on the edge of the city. It's one of the few places you can get a really nice city view. And they have this, this lit up wall underneath, and the light is from two sources. You've got these fairy lights coming through here, but you've got these color lights coming in under that. This photograph, the first attempt, I was either exposing for the city, in which case, if I exposed for the city, the light wall was overexposed. If I exposed for the light wall, the city was underexposed. How did I solve it? Graduated ND filter. Usually use a graduated ND filter aiming up to the sky to expose the sky equally for the ground, but you can use it on anything. You know, here in New York in the winter, use it on the snow so you can get some texture on your snow. For here, what I wanted really was to expose that light wall at the same constancy as I had for the city. And yeah, I just really like getting that nice bit of cloud coming through as well. So North Carolina for me was very much about night photography until we went to Wilmington. Wilmington, Hollywood of the East. I had 3 photographic goals in Wilmington. I wanted the pier from Dawson's Creek. I wanted the river court from One Tree Hill, and I wanted the river. And the only photo I'm showing of those is the river, but but the pier from Dawson's Creek is actually a beautiful shot as well, and that is in my gallery. If you were to look at the website, you'll be able to see it. Wilmington was just a really nice place to relax for a couple of days, especially after dealing with stuck in a blizzard and Charlotte. And the reason, I guess what we got fixed in Wilmington is probably just as important. Again, remember we're in the middle of winter and we've come through this blizzard. During that blizzard, our electric stopped working in the RV. Try living in an RV in the middle of a blizzard and not having any heating whatsoever. That was us for 3 or 4 days, right through. We tried everything. Finally, it was a really nice RV service center in Wilmington that, you know, figured out what the problem was and fixed it for us. But I mean, that was one of many trials in the RV that we've experienced. If you really want to read about them all, there is actually a blog on our website from each city. So I go into a bit more detail. Yeah, I'm trying to actually tell different stories here than the blog ones. From North Carolina, it was South Carolina, and any guesses where we were photographing in South? Charleston. Charleston is one of the most beautiful cities in the world. Not only is it one of the most beautiful cities, it is also a city that does not have a photography shop. For having a very photogenic city, there's no photography shop because everyone in Charleston actually orders from B&H, which when I actually went and spoke to the professional photographers, I needed a new filter that day, and I was like, and I ended up ordering it online from B&H myself, but I ideally would have liked it that day, and I found a professional photographer. I said, you know, where do you get your filters? And he's like, B&H, you order it online, so I did. But it struck me as interesting that, you know, a very photogenic city, a city as beautiful as Charleston, didn't have a photography store. It was just one of those things. This fountain is just near the famous pineapple fountain. This photograph was taken without a tripod. Ooh, no, not too hard. I basically used my hat as a tripod. This was on our night photography class, and we had this gentleman on our night photography class, Max, and Max was fantastic. He turned up for the intro class that Saturday morning with a very strong Russian accent and a little Fuji disposable camera. And he held it up and he's like, "You teach me what use good, yes?" And I just didn't know how to react. I'm like, "Seriously, you've come to with a disposable camera?" I'm like, "Well, you're not going to be able to review your photos or do too much to them. Maybe you should be using," and he's just, "I'm just kidding, it's all right." And he brought out his camera, but he did actually forget his tripod for the night class, so he got to use mine, and I used my hat. Can we see these lights here under the water jet? So what I did was place my hat on the light and rested my camera on my hat and photographed from under this water jet on a long exposure. Was I worried about my camera getting wet and falling? Absolutely. I worry about that all the time, but you know, worry doesn't equal good photos, does it? Another thing I really liked about, as we were sort of getting further south, we started discovering Spanish moss, which is two things. Well, actually, I should say it's not two things. Firstly, it's not Spanish, and secondly, it's not a moss. I actually still haven't got a clear explanation from people what it is. If you do know, feel free to email me. But photographing it is actually quite difficult because it filters the light in very different ways. Getting really, truly beautiful photos of Spanish moss is a bit harder. To this day, I'm actually still not satisfied with every photo I've got of it. I'm ideally looking, trying to see if any of them are salvageable. I don't think they are. Just means I'm going to have to go back to Savannah very soon, which has a lot of Spanish moss as well, and we like Savannah. I'll get there. But what I was doing to try and filter it through was using my graduated ND filter here on the left side. So I was using my graduated ND filter just to try and filter through where the sun was coming through. Your graduated ND filter is actually, it's probably one of the most versatile things in your kit. You know, it can be pointed up to equalize the sky, it can be pointed down to equalize lights, or cityscapes at night photography, or snow during the winter, which is, you know, bright white. It can go sideways during night photography if you've got one building brighter than the other. It's a very, very versatile filter, and I can't recommend them enough. The famous pineapple fountain, this is the most famous fountain apparently in the South. And pineapples are apparently, I've heard the story, but I've taken in so much city and historical and town information in the last 6 months that I'm going to really mess this up. And if anyone in Charleston's watching this video, I really hope that they forgive me for it. But pineapples are apparently a sign of hospitality, and when people came for dinner, I think there was pineapple given as like a guest gift, or you ate pineapple as a guest gift. And so if you go through the South, you'll see pineapples are engraved everywhere, like on fences and gates, and everywhere has pineapples or pineapple pillars, and the pineapple fountain, which is really quite pretty as well. Oh, we're finished in South Carolina. From South Carolina, we went to Savannah, Georgia. Now, Savannah is one of our favorite cities. We love Savannah. Savannah is as pretty as Charleston with a different vibe. The vibe in Charleston for me was very, well, we're in Charleston. You know, we're better than you, well, better than any other city in America because we're Charleston. In Savannah, they knew they were better. They just were happy to share that with everyone. And that's, for me especially, and I'm sure Nicole would say the same thing, the people in Savannah really helped make Savannah what it was. I mean, it was a beautiful city, and I'm going to show you photos, but it was really the people in Savannah that we loved. This first photo wasn't taken by me. This first photo was actually taken by Nicole. One of Nicole's photos made it into the presentation. Everyone can give her a round of applause. That's good. Thanks. This photo is actually me being a superhero. So we made friends very early on in day one in Savannah. And there is a photographic lesson to this story, so please pay attention. We made friends very early on, day one, with this company, Oglethorpe Tours. They run the blue trolleys that tour through Savannah. They were nice enough to let us park our RV on their property for the week, so we didn't have to pay for RV parking, and we knew it was somewhere that was, again, I was still paranoid about my RV with all my belongings getting broken into, so we wanted it sort of looked after. But also, we sort of made a bit of a deal that I'd share some of my photographs of Savannah with them, and in return they let us on the day one of the trolley. So we got a day tour of Savannah in the trolley, which to me was a really good deal. I mean, I'm going to take the photos anyway, and we want to see Savannah. As we were there at this point, so you can see the police officer, and this was the driver. I can't think of her name at the moment, but as we were there and people were getting onto the trolley was parked at the side of the road. There was a crash. This car basically crashed into it at the back. And the driver, I think it was like her third day or something like that, and she was all flustered, and she was, oh, yeah, and she was like on the phone, and I was like, okay, let's just, and I went outside to see where, what the damage was and everything like that. And you could see the driver behind the car, and he said, you know, is there any damage? I've had a look. I said, there is. You're just going to need to wait for the driver to come out and exchange insurance information. And he's like, oh, okay. And as I walked around, I started walking back around from the back of it over here. I started walking back around this way to where I am now. As I was doing that, he was like, oh, I don't know what was going through his mind, but he took off. He decided to leave the scene of an accident. Photographic lesson: if your camera is not easily accessible at the side of your body, ready to take a photograph at all times, you're going to miss a photograph. And fortunately, my camera, sorry Matt, I know it frustrates you when I move out of shot. Fortunately, my camera is usually on the side in sling mode, ready to take a photo of very, very, very quickly, to the point where I got the photograph. As he pulled away and raced up that way, I came racing up this way, quick adjustment of my shutter speed, and I managed to photograph his license plate. Yeah. So the press release that day read, travel photographer is a mild-mannered identity for a superhero. And it was a great press release, actually. It was a brilliant press release. But I got the shot, and so when the police came, and the police said, where's the guy? He didn't wait, and no, he left the scene of the accident. Oh, well, there's not going to be here's his license plate. And he was like, really? How did you get? And it was your camera needs to be on. It needs to be with you. It needs to be always accessible. Who here turns their camera off in between shots? Okay. Who realizes that your camera has an automatic off setting and it's going to put itself to sleep, and just pushing the shutter is going to turn it back on? It doesn't use any battery during that time. If you're not ready to take a shot, you're going to miss the shot. By the time you see a photograph, it's too late to take it. Okay? If you're not ready to shoot, miss the shot. But anyway, that's enough about me being a superhero. And by the way, as a thank you for actually getting the license plate, they also gave us their night haunted tour, which was really actually quite a lot of fun. So if you get down to Savannah, Oglethorpe Tours do their haunted night tour. I think I preferred that to the day tour. They're both good, but the haunted tour at night was phenomenally good. It was actually a really fun couple of hours. Fountains. Now, usually when I photograph fountains, I'm all about a slower shutter speed. In fact, I'm a big fan of slow shutter speed anytime I'm doing anything with water. When you slow down the shutter speed with moving water, you get that beautiful mist effect. And we saw that before on some fountains. When you photograph water that's perhaps still or not moving so quickly, it becomes like a mirror. It becomes really reflective, and that's actually a beautiful technique as well, just as beautiful as the slow shutter speed. With this one, I decided, nope, I want to slow down every drop of water. Motion pretty much freezes for most things at about 1/250th of a second. So at 1/250th of a second, we can start capturing, and you can't see all the detail there. You definitely can if you look at a bigger version, but you can see that it's happening every single drop of water on that fountain. That was a bit faster than 1/250th, taken at about 1/1000th of a second. Here I had to be really careful because I really wanted to capture the sky, but I didn't want to filter too much, because if I filter too much, it equals a slower shutter speed and so on and so forth. So what I actually did here, again, super versatile filters, is I used two graduated ND filters. And rather than having it in front to filter the sky, I actually had two at an angle like so. So I had an ND filter coming down diagonally here and coming down diagonally here, leaving the fountain itself in the light to have a fast enough shutter speed. They are versatile. Play with them. Be creative. The more creative you are with ND filters, the more fun you can have. Again, me trying to deal with Spanish moss. It was the bane of my existence in the South. But I also discovered a new love in Savannah, and that was cemeteries. Here's another key difference between Australia and America. Your cemeteries are interesting. Like, ours are pretty dull. Like, they're a headstone. It's a headstone. But here you've got headstones and tombs and statues. And, you know, discovering cemeteries in Georgia really set me in good stead for my next city, where cemeteries were, you know, what it was all about. We'll get there in a minute. For me, though, here's the thing about photographing cemeteries, and here's the thing about composition. And I've talked about this in a different context, in different photos, in different seminars. But for me, a photograph needs multiple components. You do not take a photograph of a tree, as a rule. You do not, or you may take a photograph of a fountain, or you may take a photograph of a postbox or a headstone, something interesting. But if it's the only component in your photograph, it doesn't have context. Photography really does need to be about storytelling, and what I really wanted here is shade and, you know, restfulness and tranquility, and trying to get a bit of that coming through with the headstones, and having that Spanish moss try and provide a little bit of, I guess, detail. A little bit of, if your focal point is the main character in your novel, everything else in it is excellent punctuation and fantastic storyline and plot line and maybe a twist in the tale. You know, we really want to try and get things like that coming through our shot. I could photograph the Spanish moss, I could photograph the headstones. It's a better photo if I incorporate both. This was fun. This was, okay, so what I'm talking about here is using a graduated ND filter at nighttime. So this was obviously a long exposure of the Pirate's House restaurant in Savannah. It's really good. It's actually, this restaurant is the Pirate's House from Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island. If you've read Treasure Island, this is mentioned in there. And it was actually, I think it's the oldest restaurant in America, operating restaurant in America. The food was okay. It, you know, wasn't sort of Delmonico's here in New York or, you know, Bobby Flay's Gatto, but it was good. It was nice Southern American, you know, fare, mac and cheese, like good mac and cheese, really good mac and cheese. But, you know, your chickens and your Southern dishes. Forgetting the plug for Pirate House for a sec. This part here, the left part, was a lot brighter than the right part. All the lights were coming from the car park over on the left, and the Pirate's House and the sign, and I really wanted that. I wanted that identifier. I love signs in my travel photography. A point of reference of where you are, where it was taken, to me is one of my favorite photos that I've taken in New York. Involves having the Lexington Avenue street sign on, because to me that was part of the iconicness. And I got that with the Pirate House sign, but what I was really getting, if I exposed for the sign, was this really underexposed. So again, graduated filter at nighttime, aim to the left. My graduated filter, dark was running over here. It was evening out about here, and this was all in the clear, which allowed me to expose for both and get both elements, the dark and the light, in the one image. Now, for those of you that are sitting there going, well, that sounds like a lot of work, firstly, it was faster than doing it in Photoshop. Just saying, it's holding a piece of plastic or glass in front of the camera. Secondly, I'm not a big fan of HDR. I use HDR here and there, and I'm actually going to show one HDR photo today. I try not to do it. To me, I think there comes a point when it stops being photography. But at the same time, it is an accepted technique, and there's some beautiful things you can get from it. Just personally, I don't like doing it. But again, I'm going to show one today just because I needed to do it to get what I wanted. In fact, that's Savannah. Where I used the HDR, it's actually here in New Orleans, and I'll get to that shortly. But what I really loved in New Orleans was the cemeteries. Before we got to the cemeteries, though, we arrived in New Orleans in time for Mardi Gras. Now, this turned out to be a phenomenally stupid idea. Where we went wrong, firstly, we modified our itinerary in order to get to New Orleans for Mardi Gras. We drove from Savannah via Alabama all the way down to New Orleans. I think it was about 16 hours of driving. And after our week in New Orleans and teaching in New Orleans, we then drove all the way back up to Jacksonville to continue our actual itinerary. Another 16 hours. I think we worked out that, forgetting the fuel, it was a ridiculous thing. And it was okay. Like, you know, I've photographed Carnival in Brazil. I've photographed Carnivale in Venice. Sorry, don't know what that was. And Mardi Gras, you know, it was good, but it wasn't anything necessarily as spectacular or more spectacular. I think we've ticked it off the bucket list. That's great. But where we really went in trouble is it rained. It was a really wet, miserable day, and it was very, very sad. Because on that wet, miserable day at Mardi Gras, my 5D Mark II kicked the bucket. It was very, very depressing. Nicole will actually tell you, we got back from unfortunately, I got these photos with it. This was, I think, the last photo taken by my 5D Mark II before Error 20s and Error 30s started kicking in, and the shutter was gone, and it was going to cost as much to replace it as, you know, get something else. This was the last photograph taken on the 5D Mark II, and so I wanted to share that with everyone today. Nicole will tell you, we went back from the parade. The camera wasn't working. We were planning on going back into Bourbon Street that night. And I lay on the bed of the RV and I cried like a child. I wept. I wept uncontrollably. That camera had done over 50-something countries on 5 continents with me. Like, it was very sad. I think they say about 120 or 150,000 shutter actuations is the lifespan of a 5D. I went back and had a look, and I had done 300 and something thousand shutter actuations. So it lived a good life. It lived a good life, and it allowed me to upgrade to a Mark III, which I'm not necessarily complaining about, but it was a very, very emotional day in Mardi Gras. So that night on the street, the only camera I had access to at that time was a Canon 1000D that was barely working as well. But putting on my 24-105 L series lens onto the Canon 1000D, which I think you guys, that's the Australian reference, I think it's the T2, maybe. I don't know if it's the right comparison. I still managed to get some nice photos out on the street that night. Fortunately, most of them are censored, so you don't get to see them. Just kidding. Now, this photo I actually took in New Orleans, not this trip. I actually took that last time, but it's what prompted us to fall in love with, well, it's one of the things that we loved about New Orleans was the streetcars, and New Orleans itself, it was that trip to New Orleans that made us go back. Because we'd been to New Orleans before, we were originally planning on running the workshops on this tour in Baton Rouge. But we love New Orleans so much, it was like, we're only going to be an hour away. Why would we go to Baton Rouge when we can drive another hour and be in New Orleans? We like New Orleans. So we went back to New Orleans. The panning technique is, it's not easy to get right. It's easy to explain. It's easy to understand. If you haven't done this or you don't do this, it's a lot of fun to learn, and you can get some really amazing things from it. This is just one of the, this is what you can do, but wildlife running in Africa, you know, motion blur of your kids playing sports. The actual technique of motion blurring your background and keeping something in focus is a phenomenally fun trick. And I call it a fun trick because it's, you know, not like I can make a career out of motion blur photography, but It's a good technique that you can use to really enhance some landscapes, really enhance some travel photography, and definitely with sport photography. The way you do it is, if you are a Canon user, you are switching to servo. If you are a Nikon user, you are switching to AFC. Most of the other brands, Sony and Fuji, I think all work off AFC as well. That's automatic focus continuous. Make sure you have a single focal point. You want that one single focal point. You want it right in the middle. And you want to be very, very comfortable. I'm actually going to pick up my camera for this. Sorry, Matt. So what you want to be doing is having your single focal point locked on your subject. You want to get your shutter speed ideally to about, I like doing it about 1/4 or 1/5 of a second. So whatever you need to do to get your shutter speed down to that 1/4 or 1/5. That's about where you're going to get the best effect. Now, the faster your subject is moving, the easier this is to do. You need to be really, really comfortable with the weight of your camera. The more you do this, the better you become. And it's all about being a human tripod and moving horizontally. If you're a bit unsteady and you go up and down, it's not going to work. You're actually going to lose the shot. If you feel more comfortable using a tripod to do it, go nuts. And notice I didn't even have it turned off then. I just pushed the shutter then and it was already functional. See? Earlier point proven, looped. Okay. And it's all about moving at the exact same speed as your object. You need to be panning at exactly the same speed. As it turns, I'm going to swivel on the chair to demonstrate. As it goes, you need to go at the same speed. A millisecond of difference either way, you lose the shot. You don't get the shot. It does take a bit of practice. If your subject's moving left to right, you're moving left to right with it at exactly the same speed. But when you get it right, it works. What is this? The level of focus on the Canal Street in the 2015 was what I was going for, and I'm happy with it. It's, you know, but it's a fun technique, and I encourage everyone to play with it. If you've got kids or grandkids, seriously, easy subjects. Just put chocolate at one end of the room, have someone release them, go. So New Orleans really furthered my love of cemeteries. This isn't the best photo I took in the cemeteries by a very long way, but it's actually one of the most famous tombstone sculptures in the New Orleans grave community. It's at Metairie Cemetery. It's called Weeping Angel. It's very, very famous. There's postcards of it all over New Orleans. And if you go to our website, you'll be able to see where it is if you are going to New Orleans. And the reason I put it up on our website is if you ask any of the photographers selling their postcards and posters in New Orleans where it is, they will not tell you. They are really, really, really bad at sharing information because they want you to buy their posters and their postcards. Sorry, New Orleans, I love you, but your photographic community is very, very, very pretentious. It took me a day. I figured out, I knew which cemetery it was. That was publicly, public information. And then I actually had to do a bit of detective work based off the other photographs I'd seen in postcards and posters, and I figured out what sort of crypt it was. I figured out the shape of the crypt roughly, and I walked through the cemetery with that little bit of information until I found a crypt that was about the same size, that had the blue windows. And I was looking for the blue windows, and when I found that, it was locked. But it was basically the doors were chained, and as I just pulled them apart, just enough where the chain pulled, this is the view I got. It prompted a series of photographs I took in New Orleans. I haven't actually released the series yet. It should be released fairly soon. It's just, again, a timing issue. I mean, you saw how long it took me to get this presentation up. And the series is called Eye Contact, and it's 12 images of photographing the sculptures, the cherubs, the angels on these tombstones in Metairie Cemetery, making eye contact with the sculptures and treating them like portraits, treating it like a portrait photography shoot. It's a series I'm actually really happy with how it came out. I'm really excited to share those images soon. If you're watching our Facebook, you'll see when it's released. That's probably where we'll announce it. So this is the HDR photograph I was telling you about. So this is HDR. For me, my main goal with HDR is I don't want it to look like HDR. I really don't want it to look like it's HDR, so I kept a lot of the shadow in there that you would normally try and get rid of, definitely here in the middle. But what I really wanted was a lack of shadow here on the leaves and on some of these branches. I did want a bit of definition of the green there. This is at a plantation called Hummus House. It's about an hour out of New Orleans, and it was a beautiful place. The food was good. The hospitality there is amazing, but this giant 500-year-old live oak, I think it was about 500 years old, is right there in front of the house, and I could have happily just cancelled the tour and spent the next 2 weeks photographing it. It was a beautiful tree. I'm looking forward. I'm actually back in New Orleans for New Year's, so I'm looking forward to heading out and just, maybe getting a few more photos of it, because it is absolutely stunning. Oh, that's it for New Orleans. We love New Orleans. Go to New Orleans. And actually, remember forever, we'll be opening a New Orleans office, if not this year, early next year. So we love it that much that I need a tax-deductible reason to visit. Florida. So as I said, we made the really stupid decision to actually then do the backtrack, and we picked Jacksonville. We picked Jacksonville, Florida as our workshop location, which was good. It was close to St. Augustine, and more importantly, we had friends. We actually know a few people in Jacksonville, which made life a bit easier. As we arrived into Jacksonville, after, let's be honest, a very trying New Orleans experience and a lot of driving. We'd been driving 16 hours the week before, 16 hours this week. My camera died, so I was upset and miserable. Nicole was doing a lot of the driving because I was so tired. It was Nicole started with the driving a lot coming out of Savannah, and now actually, we meet RV people, and I say RV people like it's a bad thing. I'm RV people now. We meet other people in the RV parks, and they hear Nicole drives, and the mother is always like, "Oh no, I couldn't do that. It's too big for me." And Nicole's fantastic at it. Except for cities, she's a bit nervous with cities, but on the highway, you should see her overtaking the trucks, letting them know that it's her road, not theirs. And she did most of the driving from New Orleans to Jacksonville. So between the two of us being in really, really disappointing moods, I should say, is probably the most politic way I can say it because she's here. We're arriving into Jacksonville not on the best talking terms. Just keep in mind that any issues you have in your relationship, when you live in an RV, it's a sardine can, they're amplified. And we arrived into Jacksonville, again with RV issues. The RV, firstly, the first RV, when we started the tour, we were renting. We were paying about $4,000 a month in rental, which is kind of ridiculous. But you see, I didn't have a credit rating since I was 2 because my parents gave me a credit card when I was 1. In Australia, you start with good credit. If you screw it up, you've got bad credit. In America, if you don't have a credit card, in preschool, then you're not going to be able to get into college. It's just a ridiculous system you guys have. But we were in that category of not having had a credit card our entire life. So we couldn't buy one or get finance for one. We had to rent, and it was ridiculously expensive. And keep in mind, this is now Florida, so we had the electrical issue, the propane issue, which technically wasn't their fault. In Delaware, we've had no electricity through the blizzards in North Carolina and coming to South Carolina. I think we counted another 4 or 5 things go wrong. We had water leaks, we had the faucets weren't working. Like all these things kept going wrong on the rental up until this point where it just, with our moods being where they were, it just blew it up. And so we arrived into Jacksonville and we went almost straight to this friend's house for dinner and wine. And she said, "So what can I get you guys?" And I said, "Marriage counselor and an RV dealer. Don't care which order, just bring them both out." And fortunately, she was the marriage counselor that night. We kissed and made up, and everything's great. She's still here. The RV dealer took a little bit more time. But the great thing about the Jacksonville area is St. Augustine. Has anyone here been to St. Augustine? If you haven't been to St. Augustine, go to St. Augustine. It is an absolutely stunning, picturesque part of the world, and we only were there for 3 hours. Like, if we had more time, I think we would have moved the workshops from Jacksonville to St. Augustine. It was like Savannah in our estimation. We just walked the streets. We fell in love with the architecture. This is the college. The story behind St. Augustine is amazing. The story behind how all the architecture is so beautiful is so good. I'm going to let you look it up for yourself. No, it's more that, again, just so much information is coming through my brain. But this is Flagler College. Is that correct, Flagler? Yeah. And Henry Flagler, I mean, he built most of the city, and he just built it because he liked it. And he built it, he was living there. I think there was a lot of business reasons. I think he was like Standard Oil. There's a lot to it, but it's a great, fascinating story that I really enjoyed when I read it. Now I want to go and, heard it. Now I want to go and look it up again, so I've got all the information. But this guy Flagler had so much impact on the architecture. I want to show the next one. This was his church. Actually, no, sorry, let me rephrase that. That wasn't his church. His church had already been done, but the church across the road wanted to be pretty as well. And he was like, well, I want it to fit in with the general aesthetic of the city that I've built. I'll give you the money for your church also. As long as you do it the way I want you to do it. But it's absolutely stunning architecture all the way through. Jacksonville, one of the few times I was able to get some sunrise photography in. As I said in the earlier session, that as much as I love photographing sunrise, for me it's always easy. I leave the hotel, I get in the rental car, I take our car, I can walk across the road, I can take the photographs. But if you want to go for a drive to go photograph the sunrise and it's in an RV, your wife is going to be bouncing in the bed and falling off and generally not talking to you for the rest of the day. So I generally don't get a lot of sunrise photography in these days. Having said that, in Jacksonville, and this actually started a new trend, along with the fountains and the state capitals, for a 4 or 5 week period, every weekend we had workshops. There seemed to be a marathon in town as well. Every week there was a marathon or a fun run or a 5K or something where the streets were closed down and there were people getting in the way of all my photographs. It was just one of those things. But we decided to avoid that on Saturday morning in Jacksonville. So we got to the park where we were teaching the workshops a little bit early. In fact, so early we decided to get there before they even thought about closing off the roads. It was still dark. We made breakfast in the RV in the parking lot of this really nice restaurant that let us park there for the weekend because we made friends. And I went for a walk and I photographed the sunrise. And I loved it. The cloud cover I was getting was great. Here I've done something a bit different. And I talked a little bit about this in the previous session. When you're taking a landscape photograph, the rule of thirds generally tells us that your horizon should be where? On a third. Whereas I love putting my horizon, especially if I'm dealing with reflections halfway through. I love putting it on the halfway horizontal. I think as soon as you've got reflection, firstly, it's acceptable. But one of the things we now teach in not all of our advanced classes here in New York and Boston and DC are still teaching essentially thirds, but what we've started doing on the advanced class on the road in Photographing America is I'm teaching a new concept, well not a new, it's a really old concept of composition, but I'm trying to get the point across more about phi. And phi is PHI, if you're writing it down, the golden ratio or the golden mean or the golden rectangle, 1.618. 1 is to 1.618. And as long as everything works in that ratio, you can put things in the middle. You can put something dead center in your middle against, contrary to every photographic guidebook and compositional YouTube video that's out there, you can put something right in the middle of your shot. And if it works in context with every other element in the photograph and it works according to phi and that ratio, it can look amazing. It's not a bad photograph. And I really tried to pull that one off here. I think if I was to take it again, whoops, bad, Luke. If I was to take it again, I'd try and get a little bit more of this in as well, because after that there was nothing there, and I think it would balance just that little bit nicer, but I really wanted that gold coming through there as well. Same fountains. You're probably sick of fountains. If you want me to skip, I can. Just kidding. This fountain was fantastic. For me, I really wanted to get all those colors. It generally was a different color at once. So it was like either purple, or it was red, or it was blue, or it was green. For me, I really wanted to get that blend of colors coming through and to get a lot of that color coming in one shot. So I took one really long exposure and I covered during different colors. So I went for 2 seconds. It was a 30-second exposure. Went for 3 or 4 seconds on the blue. Went for 3 or 4 seconds on the green. 3 or 4 seconds on the red. The reds mixed with the blues to give me the purples. The blues mixed with the yellow to give me the greens. And it all came through quite nicely. Long exposure means you can mix things up. If we do this really fun trick actually in our night class, where we've got a blue, am I correct or not? Where we have a blue glow stick and a red glow stick. and we spin them together and we get purple light. So long exposure allows you to mix colors the same way you mix colors at the paint store. It's actually a bit of fun. Think of being in kindergarten and learning that blue and red equals purple and that was the greatest thing in the world. Doing it with a camera, it brings you back to 5 years old, and it's just something I really enjoy. I talked before about treating my portraits like landscapes. And I really want to talk about how I took this photo, because when I talk about treating portraits like landscapes, it tends to confuse people sometimes. And I really want to try and get that point across, if not much else today, because I'm going to have to go a bit faster or we're going to run out of time. We'll see how we go. So with this one, I actually took this photograph with a 16-35 landscape lens. Now, most people will tell you that you don't want to take portraits at a 16-35. The focal length is too short, so you're going to get distortion. But depending on where you stand in relation to your subject, we can get around that. The other advantage of moving backwards and taking that is that I can ensure I get that background in. I really wanted that context. I really wanted it to be Jacksonville. I wanted that building. I wanted the river. I wanted the clouds. This was a prom proposal. Apparently that's a really big thing here. Like, not basically the boy asked the girl to the prom, and how they do it and the pressure they put on themselves to make it exotic and wonderful and big message is more pressure than I had on me when I was proposing to Nicole to marry me. Like, the pressure they put on themselves to do it. And so I ended up working with a high school photography class that afternoon, purely by accident. They just happened to be wanting to share the park with me, and the high school photography teacher wasn't a photographer. One thing led to another, and I ended up teaching some of the class. And I took this photograph for this couple. They were lovely. They were the only couple going to prom together that had been together for more than a year, so I think they had more of a chance, and I was like, I'll take your photo. And there we go. And no, they were lovely kids, and for me, I'm pretending that they're part of the landscape. For me, it's about, I've got a really strong focal point. It's telling a story. We've got the letters which add context. We've got the city to provide the location. It's really about, 90% of portrait photographers do the same thing. They stand far away back, zoom all the way in, blur the background, and get that nice bokeh of the background. But the background's context. I think background is a major storytelling technique for portraits, and I think it needs to be used more. So back to Georgia, which would have made sense going from Savannah, but we decided New Orleans. We went up to Atlanta. Atlanta for us was about 3 different things. It was firstly about the workshops and being very, very scared downtown. We didn't feel like it was the safest city. It's not somewhere where I would be spending a lot of time. In fact, if I didn't go back to Atlanta, I probably wouldn't be terribly upset. Having said that, there were some good elements to Atlanta, and that's really what I want to focus on. So this was the musical fountain. It's actually the Olympic rings. If you can't see that, it is the Olympic rings. And there were kids running through there and generally being annoying, and a long exposure really dealt with them. So once again, that long exposure gives you that opportunity and just gives you that nice flow of light. I don't always slow down the exposure at night. I quite often usually try to be honest. That's one of the beauties of night photography is long exposure. But when you have a lot of lights on something like this Ferris wheel, they all blend in together, and I really wanted to try and capture all those different colors in one shot. So I decided to wait and have a slightly higher ISO and take the photograph when it was stopped in order to get it looking like it was. And it just happened to be at the same moment that Cinderella was on her way out. Actually, chances are it was probably a prom proposal. It was some guys just rented this pumpkin limousine horse carriage thing to, ask his girlfriend of 2 months to go to a dance. Seriously, and you wonder why your country confuses foreigners? Again, really trying to take out that long exposure. I love long exposures, and anywhere where there's water and there's light, you're going to have fun. If you aren't a night photographer, or if you don't spend time out taking photographs at night, you really need to change that. It's some of the most fun you can have with a camera. The way I liken it in our night photography class on the tour is that, because we run 3 classes on the Saturday. On the Saturday we run an introductory class, how to manipulate your camera. a landscape class, how to manipulate time, and a night class, which is how to manipulate light. And the way I explain it is that it progressively gets easier throughout the day. There's a lot to know in introduction. You know, I need to tell you about shutter speeds and AFC and metering and a lot of really boring technical stuff. In the landscape class, we're learning about composition. In the night class, we're running around with lights and having fun. We're playing games, and night classes are always a lot of fun, especially with us. So. One of the reasons I would go back to Atlanta, Coca-Cola factory, really, like it was fantastic. They had, I think it was 160 something different varieties of Coca-Cola products from around the world, and you can try them all. And we made a good effort at it. We gave it a shot, but the sugar was just. But the tour itself was fantastic, like the history behind this company. And you know it's a prolific brand. Everyone knows Coca-Cola. I think it's actually the most well-known, up there with McDonald's, logo in the world. But it's the story behind it was what was fascinating. And being allowed to take my camera in and just get all of that was really cool as well. Just getting that history coming through. I've actually got a whole gallery of Coca-Cola factory photographs because it was just a lot of fun. The other thing Atlanta's pretty big on at the moment is The Walking Dead. Obviously, that's all filmed down in the area outside Atlanta. It's a town called Sonoya. We learned another important lesson as we came driving through, and that was it's okay sometimes to ignore the GPS. Our GPS unit took us so far off track that we just had to get our bearings and turn around and go one road over. And it turned out to be the scene where they, like the location where they do a lot of Walking Dead filming, which I'm actually a big fan of the show. So for me, it was actually a lot of fun. We went to a town called Sonoya, which if you do watch the show is Woodbury. If you watch the show, you'll know what I'm talking about. The town is Woodbury. And when we went into the store there, we said, are there any filming locations we can see? Is there anywhere we can go? And she said, no, it's just this street. Everything else is in studio. You can't find anything. It doesn't exist. And our GPS getting us lost proved us wrong. It actually took us and then we saw a shortcut there, and we took the shortcut. And as we drove through, you could see Nicole was like, what? And I'm like hitting the brake, and I'm looking around and reversing back and looking. I'm like, no, we found it. Basically, they decided to tell people that it's not around because they're coming up with tours shortly, and they don't want everyone to know where everything is because otherwise you won't do their tours because it's all public property. Once again, if you go to our website, the locations for all of these places are listed in our blog. Not wanting to, I don't like the idea, let me rephrase, I don't want to put anyone out of business. That's not my objective doing that. But if something is public, in the public domain, then I don't believe it should be charged for. That's my personal belief. As a photographer, I don't consider my work in the public domain. I'm quite happy to charge for my photography. But if I donate my photo, if I put my photo out in a certain way that is for the world, then it can be used as long as it's credited back. I don't like the idea of people making money off something that doesn't really belong to them, is probably the best way to put it. And so it upset me a little bit when they were like, well, no, I'm not telling you where the statue is. I'm not telling you where the town is. We want to make money off that. And so there you go. I'm a good person, right? Just checking. Alabama. Alabama is another place that we probably won't go back to, except to say that some of the best food we've had at the moment on our tour came from Alabama. Alabama for us was about the people. Once again, people were very much a common denominator on the tour. We found people we loved everywhere, and I'm actually going to introduce you to some in a moment. So the Alabama Theatre, that's just there to highlight we were there. The fact that they're still advertising the New Deal sort of gives you an indication of how far back in time Alabama really was. And it really was back in time. It was like stepping into another century. It was at least the 50s. The entire state actually felt like it was still in the 50s. It was absolutely insane. The people were fantastic. In Savannah, so I'd like you to meet Jess. This is Jess here, the third person in, the banjo player. When we're in Savannah, Nicole and I were walking along taking photographs along the riverfront, and we ran into these girls. And we were handing out flyers for the workshops, and there was Jess, and she took a flyer and she added Nicole on Facebook and kept in touch with Nicole. And when we were coming to Alabama, her and her family, her mother and two brothers, drove, I think it was about 2 hours-ish, to come and see us and meet us and play the banjo for us. And just to spend, that was the rental. That's all you're seeing of the rental. So they just came and they just wanted to meet people and come and play the banjo for us and spend a bit of time. The people were just fantastic. It was amazing. And we're still in touch with them. They're lovely. They're really, really good. I might get their permission. If I get their permission, we took a bit of video of them performing. If they're okay with it, I might put it up on our Facebook page if anyone's looking for it. They're actually very good. Jess is very talented. I honestly believe the only reason she's not on The Voice or American Idol is because she's too good for them. So she was very good. The food in Alabama was fantastic. We discovered two things. Steak sandwiches like you would not believe, and half-baked cookie dough. Half-baked cookie dough. So basically taking a cookie, putting the cookie dough in a skillet, half-baking it, putting on some ice cream chocolate sauce, serving it hot in the skillet, and it is the best dessert on the planet. If you don't believe me, you need to go to your supermarket, buy a tube of cookie dough. You don't need to make your own. Put some in a skillet, put it in the oven, half-cook it, eat it with ice cream and chocolate sauce, and thank me later. But the steak sandwich was just as good. They were both from the same restaurant, Urban Cookhouse in Alabama. It's a family-owned restaurant that's about to become a very good chain. They're doing really well with it, and rightly so. If you get a chance to eat at Urban Cookhouse, there you go. For us, though, Alabama wasn't just about the people, it wasn't just about the food. It was about, again, stepping back into the 50s and seeing that history. And probably the most poignant thing for us was the Civil Rights Museum, and seeing a lot of what actually happened. It's very alien to us in Australia. We don't grow up with that as really part of our education or part of our history. We don't really know a lot about it. And for Nicole and I, learning more about Martin Luther King Jr. and learning more about Rosa Parks, it was a really exciting time for us to be exposed to how much goodness was happening at that time and the change. And I think I would have made a perfectly good Vietnam War aged hippie. Like I would have been there marching and having a dream. I just admire the history so much. I'm going to try and move a little bit faster because this is the equivalent of going over to someone's house for a slideshow after their trip, right? Sorry. I'm trying to keep it interesting and educational. Mississippi. Mississippi, again, another state. Recently, Nicole read an article that said there are certain states you should probably not worry about visiting. Alabama, Mississippi, there are a few others, Oklahoma, Kansas, Missouri, and Arkansas. And we actually really loved Little Rock. I'll talk about Little Rock shortly. We absolutely loved Little Rock. So I don't think that should be on the list. But for the most part, I'm kind of okay with agreeing with the other ones. Mississippi for us was, again, about state capitals. The people were lovely. The food was very oily, so we didn't really eat a lot of it. We cooked a lot ourselves that week. But it was really about the architecture in Mississippi. It was beautiful. Friday night, if you just go out of town, I can't think of the name of the district. What was the name of the district? Fondant. Thank you. Fondant district is where they pretty much have a street party every Friday night. Beer on the streets, barbecue, everything's available, live music, everything's happening, and it's well worth. That was actually a bit of fun. Interestingly, I would have loved to go to Oxford, Mississippi, because apparently, two things: Morgan Freeman has a restaurant there, and two, he was in residence in Oxford at the time, and I wanted to go and stalk him, but the voice of reason. Okay. Moving forward, but Mississippi again. It was for me. It was more of a, I've read everything Mark Twain ever wrote, and I was really, really, really keen to sort of see it for my own eyes. And I think disappointingly, and the reason why I'm a bit disappointed on Mississippi is I think that the romantic ideal I had of what Mississippi was based on reading these books and growing up with these books didn't really come out in what I was seeing in the landscapes. And I think my photographs sort of show that as well. I wasn't getting, the quality I could have gotten in Mississippi. So let's go from Mississippi. From Mississippi, we went to Texas, and Texas was a bit of fun. Texas Texas, we went to Houston, Dallas, from Dallas down to San Antonio via Austin. We did not spend as much time in Austin as we would like. I know I'm going to get a whole bunch of emails as soon as Matt puts this video up on air saying, you know, why didn't you spend more time in Austin? It was a timing issue. We really wanted to, and we really hope to one day. Dallas is actually the next city we're going to be opening a full-time Remember Forever, and that will be sometime this year. Dallas was fun, but we'll go through the photos. Houston, hip, tasty, funky, savvy. It was all of those things. It was also not as enjoyable as the other cities. For me, Houston was a city, there was nothing really differentiating it from other cities that you can visit, apart from Johnson Space Center. Johnson Space Center was a lot of fun. If you get a chance to go, you need to go. And they had white tigers. Now, I'm actually not going to talk about the technique now. I'm going to share a technique on animal photography at zoos and things very, very shortly, because there's something that I think is really, really helpful. And we will get to it, but I'll share it in Boise rather than in Texas. Just wanted to share the photo. Dallas. So, that is the window. I'm standing right where the bullet entered. I took that photo from right where the bullet entered, and I figured out who did it. Check the block. Okay. As we move through, cave photography. It won't be a surprise, graduated ND filter. Because these caves are tourist attractions and there's also safety issues, they light these things up way too much, and you really want that slow shutter speed, which you're going to get anyway because they didn't light it up quite enough. But as soon as you use that slow shutter speed, all of a sudden you're getting all these little bits of overexposure. I'm in the process of making kind of like a variable graduated ND filter. It's my own invention, but being able to control where the graduated is at any point on the lens. And if I can pull this off, I'm going to make millions. And B&H will sell it. You'll see it actually first on their website on sale. Fountains, surprise, surprise. But really what I wanted there was the fountains and the color. And for me, color and light and that slowness of shutter speed was really becoming more and more important as we went. The slow shutter speed was also extremely important in San Antonio at the missions because people were just walking in the way. Like, I think there was something about Texas that if you see a camera, it was kind of like a scavenger hunt to get in the way. You know, photo bombing is an art form in Texas. But having said that, you know, I'd always heard, you know, like you hear a lot of stories and you talk to other Americans, and I think a lot of Americans sort of go, it's only Texas, and I really loved it. New Mexico. New Mexico is where all the fun started. We were lucky enough to be in New Mexico at the same time as the Gathering of Nations. If you don't know what the Gathering of Nations is, it's a powwow of all the Indian tribes and nations in America. But having an Australian accent, really, really helpful because I managed to talk my way into the floor. I managed to be allowed to walk amongst everything going on and photograph it, and I got some incredible photos that day. What I'm showing from New Mexico at the moment is just a small sampling. But the photographic lesson from this is ask. Don't look at stuff going on and saying, I'm not going to be allowed to go there. They've got the professional photographers. They've all got credentials. Find someone, ask, be nice. I said this in an earlier session. You can ask anything and say anything if you do it with a smile, a cheeky grin, and, you know, a bit of positive. Be positive, have a positive attitude. But you ask, you get, and you get some amazing photos. These kids were phenomenal. They were doing the drums right through the whole thing, and this was during one of the breaks. I have maybe 20 or 30 really good images that I'm proud of, hopefully in our galleries from the Gathering of Nations. I'd love you to see them. New Mexico is almost famous for Roswell. Here's something I learned about America, and Roswell really hit the point home. Something I've learned about America is quite simply that if your town is famous for something, no matter how small or insignificant or crazy, you own it. And I love that about your towns. Like Roswell was from the green footprints painted on the footpath to the, you know, I'm phoning home signs. We walked into a souvenir store and we got Greetings Earthling, and I just really, it was so over the top, but it was so great over the top. And Roswell wasn't just it. Like, I mean, I can tell if I come across other towns in as I'm going through, I'll mention it. But Roswell was definitely the one that owned it the most. What was really great coming out of New Mexico, and from New Mexico we drove to Arizona via Utah. So we did a bit of a loop. Once again, we gave ourselves a stupidly long, kind of abnormal drive, but we did it because we knew that we wanted to see certain things, and this time we were happy to do it. This was the Acoma tribal lands. Here's something else I've learned. You need to be very, very, very careful if you're photographing on Native American reservations. You need to get a photo license. You need to go to the office of the tribal lands and pay for a photo license. Because they have the right to confiscate your camera if you don't have one and they approach you. If they come up to you, if you're taking a photo on a reservation, and they come up and say, "Can I see your photo license?" and you don't have one, they legally have the right to confiscate your camera. Remember, it's not public property. It's not like a public street. Even streets on a reservation are Native American property. And they're very, very careful about what happens with the photos. You need certain, just because you have a photo license doesn't mean you can publish or produce. You need to actually get extra permission to publish your photographs. A really important lesson, because I can imagine keep in mind it's a brand new 5D Mark III at this point, it's not even my Mark II. If my camera got confiscated off me in the Acoma tribal lands, I would have been horrified. We spent $13 on the photo license. We were there for a total of 35 minutes, but happy to have spent the 13, just for peace of mind. From there, we drove to Arizona via Utah. So I'm going to start at Utah. We went up to Monument Valley. This is an area where the biggest thing that hit home is how much I really miss my father. My father passed away several years ago. And every year we had a tradition of watching as many John Wayne movies as we could. If one was on TV, we sat down and watched John Wayne together. I think I've seen The Searchers 19,000 times. And Monument Valley is pretty much the set of all of those movies. It was really great sort of seeing it in person, and I really would have liked the, "Hey Dad, guess where I am?" But we had that conversation a lot when I was traveling. I once called him from the Great Wall of China, and he thought it was just to see if I could get him to pick me up from the airport when I arrived back in a few days. Monument Valley really hit home that as well. Grand Canyon. So I shot the Grand Canyon two ways. We walked down. We only went for, we didn't walk all the way down because I think I've explained in previous sessions how much I love walking. But I actually originally said, "Hey, let's do it." And Nicole was just sitting there going, "Seriously? Think about it. Think about it." And talked me out of it, which was actually very smart. So we walked down to one of the lookouts. And as we walked down to one lookout, I shot everything with a 16-35. And as we turned around and walked up, I shot everything with a 180mm macro. I really wanted to see what I could get and what some differences were. This was obviously with a 16-35, one of the mules that apparently was unavailable to, he was just sitting there, but too busy to give me a ride down to the bottom of the thing. If you're interested in going to the mule rides on the Grand Canyon, interesting tidbit, they book out about a year in advance. So if you're planning on doing a mule ride down to the Grand Canyon for photography, book it well in advance, 1 year. Colorado River, shot with a macro lens from up at the top of, almost at the top of the Grand Canyon. So I just really wanted to point out that you don't necessarily need amazing zoom, 100 to 400. That's a 180mm macro, and I'm shooting from the top of the Grand Canyon down at the Colorado River in between. Okay, and macro lenses can be zoom lenses can be macro lenses. Get the equipment that's going to be the most versatile for you, but do the best job it can. So as we came out of the Grand Canyon, we discovered this conservation park called Bearizona in Williams, Arizona. Write it down, Bearizona. $20 a person. Probably one of Nicole's favorite days in America, and definitely up there with mine. You drive amongst the animals. We're driving our RV at this point. Actually, this was afterwards. We went on a second tour with them. But the people at Bearizona were lovely. The animals were fantastic. See, my slideshow screwed up and it didn't take away the other one. We got to see a dancing bear. I mean, how often do you really see a dancing bear? We got to see a bear eat watermelon. If you've never seen that, that is a lot of fun. It sounds really weird, but it is a lot of fun. And we got to actually meet their bear cub. They've got a baby black bear cub named Katy Berry. I know the pun was terrible. We also met their other beaver, Justin Beaver. I mean, I'm trying to share the personality of this park with you because it is that fun. And they were lovely people, but we got talking, and again, being nice. Actually, we didn't ask, this was offered. They brought out the bear cub to meet us, and we got to pat this baby bear cub, which is, to this day, many of you have seen a photograph of me being mauled by a baby tiger. This was almost as cool. This was up there for me in the highlights. And then we went to Tombstone. That wolf picture is driving me nuts. I missed an animation step. Matt will fix it in post. We went to Tombstone, and again, this was another Luke missing his father. You know, really, Monument Valley, Tombstone, Deadwood. You know, that was my father's and my relationship, and Scotch and Port. But that was our relationship, and you know, being there, and actually we watched the gunfight at the OK Corral. We actually watched Tombstone, the movie, afterwards, because one of the things that this tour has been doing, if a movie's set somewhere, or if we go somewhere, we find a movie set there and we watch it the next night. And we've watched so many movies just set in different places, you know, and enjoying every moment of it. But we really liked Tombstone. San Diego, Nicole was so happy to get to the beach. Nicole was happy to see a Californian sun. I wasn't happy that petrol jumped $1 a gallon. But San Diego was lovely. We really enjoyed it. For me, San Diego says Top Gun. Miramar is there, you know. It was great. We ran some fantastic classes in San Diego. Got some fantastic skies, and being again coastal gave us, you know, different elements of sky. You get different skies coastal than you do inland. You get very different colors, you get very different textures in the clouds. And it was nice actually being back on a coast and getting some of that color coming through. The Gaslamp district, Gaslamp Quarter, if you want to eat in San Diego, this is where you go. There is a restaurant for everything, and it is well worth it. The food is really good. And I think because, you know, everyone's so annoyed at paying so much for gas, the price of restaurants was actually very reasonable. So, I'm actually going forward to a certain photo because, again, I want to teach something from it. Obviously, this is a very famous pose anyway. We've seen, everyone should have seen the World War II victory. Was it World War II or World War I? I think it was World War II. Yeah, it was World War II. The moment in Times Square where the sailor grabbed the nurse, and it became one of the most prolific photographs of the 20th century. And there is this giant sculpture. Basically, it's called, what's the sculpture called? It'll come to me in a moment. And it's right there on the harbor in San Diego, and it was absolutely beautiful. But the problem with it was, for me, is that they had way too much light going on. You can see one of the lights sort of coming through there. They had way too much light. They had, I think, like 12 lights at various points around the sculpture, and it was just too hard to photograph on a nice slow shutter speed. So I started covering the lights. Like I was, I had an umbrella because it had been raining. Well, it looked like rain. It didn't actually rain because I control the weather. But I used the umbrella to block one light. I gaffer taped or duct taped another one up. I took control out of 5 of their 9 lights or 12 lights and minimized how much light and picked which light was coming out in order to get the shot that I wanted to get. So you don't just need to create light or supplement light. Sometimes it's fun to take light away and see what you get in a photograph as well. San Diego is also cool because of Legoland. If you haven't been to Legoland, you need to go. There is a Lego America, like you're walking through streets like Las Vegas and New Orleans, and it looked like I'm sitting there going, that's where we run our workshop in Las Vegas. Wow, we stood there in New Orleans, and I got really happy. Los Angeles. We decided in Los Angeles to keep it really simple. We didn't go to Disneyland this trip. You know, we've both been many times, many times. We spent a fair bit of time with a friend in LA, which was really great, but our classes were run at Santa Monica Pier. And for me, Los Angeles, the photos I'm showing from Los Angeles was really about trying to capture the joy of Santa Monica Pier without taking all the traditional stuff. I wanted the roller coaster and the Ferris wheel, and I stood there for ages to get that one. I wanted the pier, and the fact that it was a seascape as well. But really I wanted both of those things at night also. So for me it was about, my long exposure was really about using the beach as my reflection and getting all of that beautiful, almost like summer night sort of vibe coming through in my photograph, which I think I actually achieved with that one. And that one sort of having, you know, more like, you know, the end of the night. You're just a couple of people that weren't moving. It's all a bit quieter, and really have that come through. From Los Angeles, we went to San Francisco. We went to San Francisco. One of the best drives in the world.
That one.
Route 1, Highway 1. Highway 1 from Los Angeles to somewhere north of Portland, like the Oregon coast. Honestly, we're going to come back and do it. If I'm going to talk Nicole back into an RV, it is for two things: Oregon coast and Yellowstone. I kid you not. They're the only reasons I'm going to probably get it back in. But it was just such a beautiful coastline and rolling hills. And for here, what I really wanted to talk about was a long exposure, but not too long. So half a second, where you start getting the benefits of all the color coming through without getting all the motion blur and things like waters and waves. So anytime you can get your landscape photography shutter speed down to about half a second or slower, you start getting happiness, and half a second's enough. But San Francisco is a beautiful city. We really liked it. I was talking before about, I'll talk about it in a second. We were there for Memorial Day. That's where we were for Memorial Day, which is, our classes are a bit quieter because of that. I really didn't mind. It was really nice to walk through the Presidio and see what was going on, which was another movie I've watched since traveling. For me, I've talked about being able to control the mist as well as the weather, that my power works in order for me to get the photograph I need to take, and I think this is a really good example that the mist was doing what I needed it to do to get a photograph that was happy. Okay, Yosemite. This one does definitely look better on the TV screens rather than the projector. There's a lot of different schools of thought. A lot of different people have a lot of different ideas on how to do night photography and star photography. And for me, it's really quite simple. Faster than 20 seconds. 20 seconds is my absolute cutoff because I don't necessarily want the movement of the stars. Secondly, this is where I have a higher higher ISO, 1600 or higher. Embrace the noise. Embrace the noise. You will never hear me say that in any other context apart from doing this, but embrace the noise. Thirdly, you need a foreground. If you do not have a foreground and context, it's not going to look as good. It's just going to be like noise. Fourth, you really want to make sure what you're photographing is going to present something, and for most of the time, it's going to be the Milky Way. Where is the Milky Way going to be on any given night? Google. No. There's an easier way. There is an app. It is called, once again, Luke endorsing products without any recompense. I'm going to have to send an agent out. And I'm running low on time. I'm going to have to go really quick. Star Walk. S-T-A-R space walk. W-A-L-K. It's $3.17 Android, 99 cents Apple. Well, at least it was when I looked at the prices a couple of weeks ago. Best app, but it's in real time. So wherever you aim your camera, this is what you're seeing the sky. And also you can see the clouds in the Milky Way. So wherever you're standing, you can see where the clouds are going to be and you can photograph accordingly. It is the best app for doing exactly this. Star Walk. Star Walk. Yep. Star Walk. Even though Yosemite is not San Francisco, it was part of the journey, and heading up into Portland, once again, that's actually that same mountain range where I took that photograph, just taken during the day. Redwood National Park. As we were coming out of California towards Portland, Redwood was, again, another place that we could easily spend 1 hour, 2 hours, 4 hours, 6 weeks, 8 weeks. Life. I could build a cabin there and quite happily go out and take photographs every day, and I think I'd be quite happy. But the Oregon coast is definitely some of the most picturesque part of America, and if you don't get up there, you're absolutely insane. This was a bit of fun with tilt shift, just because for me, my position where I was to take that photograph, I mean, I could have walked down, but it was really windy actually, like really, really windy that day, and I really didn't want to walk down, so tilt shift really allowed me to take the focus off the foreground and really put it there on the mid-ground where I wanted it. Long exposure really gives us those beautiful light patterns. Again, I'm going to be going a lot faster now just because you guys don't want to be here until April. And from Portland, we headed up to Seattle. Once again, my control of the weather meant no rain. But we did get some beautiful skies. We got some absolutely beautiful stuff throughout the day, throughout the night. Pike Place fish markets. The world famous Pike Place fish markets. They throw the fish, you throw the fish, everyone has a really good time. Really fantastic photographic opportunity. Just make sure you're back on AFC or servo. If you're a Canon, just to make sure that you are able to track that fish, because they will move. That's a guy called Scott, who is one of their professional fish jugglers. And they're really good guys. A lot of fun to be had. Really good fish as well, but a lot of fun to actually watch and photograph. From there we went to Olympic National Park. Has anyone ever seen a tree grow out of another tree?
Yes.
That's fantastic. I hadn't seen that before now. I thought that was amazing, so I just wanted a photo. But again, just those really nice slow shutter speeds even during daytime allow us to get this. Even in the light, using a variable ND filter to slow down the shutter speed, make the water do what you want it to, and also bring out the greens in that moss naturally. Who watched Twin Peaks? Yeah, I used to love Twin Peaks. As we came out of Seattle, east down towards Boise, we stopped at the town of Snoqualmie, which is actually the town of Twin Peaks, and we went to, that was the diner from Twin Peaks. We went there and we did have cherry pie and a damn fine cup of coffee. The cherry pie was very good as well. It was the best cherry pie I've ever had. I'm happy to say I am wanting to go back. From Seattle to Boise. Now Boise was special for two reasons. One, it was a beautiful little city. I wasn't expecting to like Boise as much as I did. And secondly, we finally bought our own RV. Everyone can applaud. Yay! We bought our own RV. Finally, the journey was becoming a bit more under our control, because by now it's been 5 months in the RV. We've almost 5 months. I've just covered 5 months of photography, by the way, guys. We're paying, count that by $4,000. It was becoming ridiculous. So we really wanted our own. And in Idaho, we actually managed to buy one. I'm going to just zoom through. Okay, so let's talk a bit about technique. How to take photos of animals at the zoo. You want the shallowest aperture possible, 3.5, 2.8, 1.8 if you're using a 50mm. I'd rather not use a 50mm. This is where you want to zoom. Zooming a lot with a combination of that shallow aperture means you're not going to see fences. You're not going to see gates. You're not going to see bars. The more you zoom, the shallower your aperture. And you can see there that there is grass and trees in his way, and it's barely a distraction. It's just part of what's going on. We can shoot through things. You can make some things invisible almost, sort of. Sports photography. Keep your eye on the ball is my #1 rule with sports photography. Follow the ball, not the player. There's our new RV. Everyone, Nicole's going to get really angry that I've put it up because she thinks it's ugly. If we could afford it, I honestly guarantee you that would be blue with the Remember Forever logo in white, and it would look really awesome. But we're still paying off the $20,000 from renting a thing, so it's going to be a little while. But they built them to last in 1988. Unfortunately, they painted them accordingly. But it's a great little RV. We've named it Thomas, the tank engine. So Thomas is getting us around now, and I just wanted to, Nicole's really going to get angry at me later on. So feel free to come and ask questions after the seminar. And from Boise, we went to Salt Lake City. Salt Lake City, we spent a bit of time in the Bolivian. We spent a bit of time in the Bolivian salt flats, the Salar de Uyuni, and loved every moment of it. And for us, Salt Lake City was very similar, or the Great Salt Lake was very similar. We really got a lot of that same photographic opportunity there that I had in Bolivia, and it was nice to not have to go to Bolivia to get it. But state capitals, woohoo! Apparently that's the state capital, it is the state capital. The Salt Lake City state capital is apparently the one they use as a stunt double for the US Capitol in movies. Apparently. That if they're going to blow up the Capitol and they're using different pyrotechnic techniques, rather than risking the US Capitol, they bring it out to Salt Lake City. Don't know. Nicole's a big Winter Olympic fan, so we went to the Olympic Park where the Olympics are, and we actually went up to the top and saw how absolutely insane people are going down the ski jump. Now, obviously, that's usually filled with snow, and you're doing it on snow, but I had vertigo just looking at it. So I wanted to take a photograph of one of the lunatics. You can see him on the top left. I just thought they were absolutely insane. They were practicing their ski jump on grass and landing in a pool. Kind of nuts, but it was really interesting. Montana. I've had like Mississippi, Montana was somewhere I really wanted to visit because of an earlier fascination with something in media, and Mississippi was Mark Twain. Montana was Lonesome Dove. And it was all about getting to Montana and Lonesome Dove, and I really just wanted to get to Montana. So for me, it was about really seeing beautiful, picturesque countryside. Because I'm moving quickly, I'm going to tell one story from Montana, and that is this one here. Thomas John, aged 3 days. We found this town that used to have a population of 5,000, now has a population of 64. Back in, I think, the late 1800s, it got hit by diphtheria, and pretty much everyone died. Almost the entire town died out. If you look at this next one, you can see there that they lost their 2-year-old, and then almost to the day, a year later, they lost their infant. You know, the sadness and the stories, and you know, photography, for me, it's not just about capturing a moment, but it's about identifying what that moment is as well, and you know, telling the story from it and getting that story from it. I think I said it in the earlier session that part of our job is to create an emotional reaction from someone looking at a photograph. And you know, I can't look at this photo now without feeling incredibly miserable for that family. You know, 2 children in a year, almost to the day, and one of them an infant. Let's move off from Montana. From Montana, we went to our favorite place in America so far. Yellowstone National Park. Yeah, who's been? Yeah, go. Best investment we've made, besides our RV, is actually what's called the America the Beautiful National Park Pass. It is $80 for a year, and it's unlimited entry into national parks. When you've got an RV, each entry is $25 or $20 to $25. We've now been to something like 13 national parks, 14 national parks, do the maths. It's absolutely well worth it. But Yellowstone is one where we are, again, I can talk Nicole back into the RV if it's to go to Yellowstone. Just absolutely beautiful countryside, and we loved every second of it. The Dakotas, that's north and south, not Fanning. So we were in Mount Rushmore for July 4th, and we were expecting fireworks, and we were expecting celebration, and we were expecting all sorts of stuff, but there apparently have not been fireworks there for a couple of years, and there won't be for at least another 3 or 4, and I felt like we wasted the holiday. Because last year I was in Boston, and I photographed July 4th in Boston. But having said that, it was absolutely fantastic to see it. It's amazing. After Mount Rushmore, we went to Crazy Horse. Has anyone here been to Crazy Horse? How amazing is Crazy Horse Monument? Okay, for those of you that don't know, Mount Rushmore fits into the size of that part of the mountain. This project will probably not be completed in my lifetime. I'd be surprised if it was. I kind of hope it would be because I'd love to see it. But this is how it's going to look when it's finished. Wow. That mountain is going to look like that. That is the end result of the sculpture. Because it was July 4th, we got to see them blow up part of, I think if we go back we can see, they're actually blowing up part of the mountain to create some of the sculpting. It's amazing what they're doing. But if you Google the story, like it is actually such an inspirational story. The original sculptor died, his wife took over the project. She died this year. His kids, he's got 10 kids. I think 8 of them run the project now. It's an amazing story. There's just another view of Crazy Horse. The Badlands, you know, once again, Dances with Wolves. I just really wanted to go and see the area. Mount Rushmore at night, going really quick because I don't want anyone upset at me. Rocky Mountain National Park. Now, this is where my control of the weather was coming a little bit. I had to be really careful. I talked before about being careful what I say. I was joking about controlling the weather. 5 people got hit by lightning that day in Rocky Mountain National Park. I wasn't one of them. But the friend, no, well, they don't know. I probably will be now. But what happened was, the question was I sued? But the friend we were with was driving with the sunroof open because the rain wasn't there, but the lightning was. And I'm like, Jeff, I've been claiming control of the weather all day. You're driving with the sunroof open. 5 people have been hit by lightning. I'm pretty sure someone's aiming. And he closed the sunroof for me. But, you know, just needing to be a bit careful. But Rocky Mountain National Park is definitely one of the most beautiful places I've ever been. It's up there on the list and can't wait to go back. And just for, you know, something different, another state capital. But I really liked the sky in that. I really liked the gold. I got that. This sunrise, you've got an hour and a half to play with the golden light. Sunset, you've got about 15 minutes to really maximize that. You've really got to maximize that 15 minutes, and I think this was a really good opportunity being able to do so. Just zooming through. Let's go back. So since Colorado, we've now done Kansas City to Oklahoma City to Little Rock. So we're actually now 4 weeks ahead of where I've shown you photos. I do have photos with me from Oklahoma City and from Kansas City, which I'm not going to share because I was going to, I really wanted to, but I spent so long sort of doing that. Well, here's a song my papa told me. And, you know, sorry, that was a Garth Brooks joke for anyone who saw the show. And I did take a bit too long telling a few stories and, you know, being the really annoying person with a slideshow of their travels. So I didn't quite get there, but they are in our galleries on our website. And if you really want to go and look at the photos or you want to keep in touch and you want to ask questions, feel free. I wanted to make sure we've got time, you know, 5 minutes for questions to be asked. But before we do, what I would really like to do is just let you know where we are next. So these are the remaining cities in the Photographing America tour. St. Louis is the week after next, Memphis this week, St. Louis the week after next, Minneapolis, Milwaukee, Chicago, Indianapolis, Louisville, Nashville. You'll notice there's a week after Nashville when we go through Kentucky so I can do the distilleries. We've taken that weekend off. Cincinnati, Detroit, Cleveland, Buffalo, Montpelier, and then we're actually heading back down through New England to come back to New York for a couple of days before I get to actually have a vacation that doesn't involve me driving around and teaching. There is a code, BHPhoto50. BHPhoto50 is going to give you 50% off any of the Photographing America stuff. So if anyone here decides they want to come out and visit us in Nashville or Detroit or Cleveland, or if you're watching this at home on YouTube, these are the cities, that's the code, that's 50% off, and that is Photographing America up until 3 weeks ago. Thank you very much. Any questions, feel free to ask.
Whether you're a hobbyist or a professional, B&H has the answers to your questions. Experience a world of technology at our New York City Superstore. Connect with us online or give us a call. Our staff of experts is happy to help.